thinks the Middle East is a great place to do business, but you're not actually that strong a brand, you're going to have a problem.
And Mariya, talking about adaptation, are you going to create the same offering for the Middle East market? And where do you get your inspiration from?
I always get inspired by the British culture, craziness of London, and also the beautiful English country. I love also visiting British historical museums and palaces, and just traveling and meeting incredible people. They always inspire me. Well, currently in Middle East, we have 2 stores, and we offer to Middle Eastern customers the same collection as in the UK. But we always create a limited edition collection. Recently we created one of diamond dust bag, and we worked with a French factory who used the latest laser technology, and they inserted the diamond dust into the leather, and it's very unique piece.
I'd love to see that. That sounds amazing. Now, Duncan, what about you? How do you, when you're taking on a new brand, you have a nice array of brands, and a lot of those are fashion brands, aren't they? When you're looking to take on new brands or looking to expand those brands, what strategies do you put in place to make sure and ensure that each one of those brands gets an equal footing, gets in the right place at the right time, and how do you actually look at each brand and say, right, I know where this is going to do well?
Wow, good question. I think that first of all you've got to work very closely with the brand. The brand has to understand what is actually possible for them in the marketplace, and sometimes if you start off with your opinion being that you can say, let's say, open 5 stores and they want to open 50 stores, then basically there's no point in going forward. But I think the important thing for me is really about the relationships with the landlords, because they're the people that are going to make you successful, and you need to be sure that the brand that you're bringing in, first of all, it has a place in the market, it has a customer in the market, and I think that there are a number of brands which are extremely popular, but there are also a number of brands who come into the market, and I'm sure they will sit there and wonder why they're not successful. And it's not necessarily because they're in the wrong mall or in the wrong location in the mall. It can tend to be because they're just not suited for the international business. And I think, which I think Neil touched on, that your brand has to be able to travel from its home territory and be an international brand. Just because you're strong in your home country doesn't mean that you actually have the ability then to come overseas and have an impact in the market here. And I think sometimes brands aren't aware always of the level of competition that is in the Middle East as well. And I think it's probably one of the most competitive markets. So if you're bringing a brand into the market, it has to have a clear identity, and it must have a clear identity with the customer base that's here. And we deal with a lot of different nationalities, so the tastes can vary an awful lot. And it comes back to, again, that you must have something which is truly international. I think also from the brand perspective, sometimes, particularly at the moment with the economic recession in the United States and throughout Europe, brands tend to see the Middle East as an easy option to, first of all, they don't have to invest, because as a franchisee, you're going to put all the money into the business. Secondly, they don't need to invest, or they think they don't need to invest, which is also extremely dangerous. And they will appoint somebody on a part-time basis to look after your business overseas. And I think as soon as you're in those sort of situations, you understand, first of all, the brand doesn't really know what international business is, and it's going to be extremely difficult maybe to develop that brand and take it as far as you would probably want to.
Yeah, we discussed this yesterday, didn't we, between us, that these are some of the challenges that people don't actually realise when they're looking to enter the Middle East. Obviously, there's a big need to do your homework, and we discussed that. How does the market differ, Jeremy, obviously to that in Saudi Arabia? Because you've really got your wealth of expertise within that market. How would you say this differs to this region?
Well, I think anybody that's familiar with Saudi will immediately be able to kind of pinpoint some of the issues, which are, a mixture of cultural, religious, economic, political. Everything goes around in a big kind of swirly circle, and all those factors come into play with one another almost on a daily basis. But just to give you a quick example, only yesterday of some of the quirkiness of doing business in Saudi, we find that every night where there's a big football match on, that our sales will drop by 15 or 20%. And that happened yesterday, and I called my sales manager this morning to say, hey, what happened to the sales last day? And he said, well, boss, sorry, but there was a big football match on. So why is that significant in Saudi? It's significant because in Saudi, women can't easily take themselves to the map. And the guys want to watch the big European football match. So what happens? The women don't go out shopping, and sales go down. That's just a yesterday example of how difficult it can be retailing in Saudi. But then on top of that, you've got a whole load of other issues, like the fact stores have to shut several times a day so that the people can go and pray. There's all kinds of challenges.
So we need big TV screens in the malls in Saudi, guys. So looking at other challenges across the Middle East, obviously we touched base as well, guys, yesterday on rising costs, rentals.
The challenge for us going forward as retailers is that our cost bases are actually increasing quite dramatically. I know there's a lot of landlords here, and there's a very sensitive subject, which is rentals, and retailers are always sort of harping on about how much the rents are going up. But I think the reality is that it's not just rents. Costs are going up across the board. Your staff costs are increasing. Indirect taxation within some of the countries as well is increasing. So it is becoming harder and harder. I think also from a brand perspective, and particularly when you go back to the new brands, and if you're talking about Dubai, very specifically Dubai, the first thing the brand will say to you is that they want to be in Dubai Mall, or they want to be in Mall of Emirates. And that is the number one on their wish list. And I think whereas Jeremy has other challenges in Saudi, certainly if you say that you want to launch your brand in the UAE, then that's your biggest challenge, or your two biggest challenges that you're going to have. But I think also going back to the costs, there's definitely your, what I would say, your prime retail locations. And of course the landlords in those locations can command extremely high rentals. But the problem that you have is that when you go to, let's say, the B, C grade malls, the landlords also think that they can charge the same level of rental sometimes as the likes of Dubai Mall and Mall of Emirates. And I think that's also the big challenge for us as well, because you have to try and diplomatically explain that maybe they're not getting quite as much footfall as these malls, and your sales are not going to be the same. I think the other thing with the landlords as well, which would help an awful lot, is a lot more transparency, and I think it's something that on the previous panel people touched on. Whereas as a retailer, we're very transparent, or we have to be transparent about our sales. I think to make good business judgments from our side, it would also be good to have a lot more information coming through from the landlords. So I'm not talking about sales figures of other retailers, but certainly by category, how you're performing, for example, in a mall, or how a certain category is performing in a mall. Also footfall figures, this kind of thing. I think they're also going to be extremely helpful. And going forward, it's the sort of thing that a lot of brands are asking for as well before they've actually made their commitment on a location. So as a franchisee, you have that as a challenge to try and get that information, because it's not out there in the open market for you. I think if there was some sort of audited figures that landlords were prepared to give you, it would be extremely helpful for us.
We were also talking about changing customer behaviour, because a lot of people now are becoming more price conscious, value conscious, but they still want the high quality, but don't necessarily want to pay that high price point. Now I know a lot of the retailers in the Middle East that have come from the UK, their prices differ quite significantly here in the UAE. But I know that you mentioned yesterday the Boux Avenue is not going to alter their price point that much. So that's got to be an advantage for you now.
For everybody, I think the first person it's an advantage for is the consumer. So
driving traffic into the store with a really compelling shop environment, great customer service, amazing product at a reasonable price is the key to successful retail. I think the challenge is that in the UK, as we pass through recession, it's become really clear that having high streets in the UK that contain the same brands, one after another, has damaged our business. And there's been winners and losers in the UK retail estate. So I was travelling the US a couple of months ago, and I saw an advert for a supermarket, and there was 2 words underneath it which just said consistent freshness. And I believe that successful malls, successful high streets, and successful brands are able to live that every single day. So your experience as a consumer is the first time you've had it every single time, and it's perfect. So that's the expectation of our business.
And Mariya, looking at value and high quality, your brand epitomises luxury and high quality, and yet has a great price point. So it sits alongside in the UK, would you say, Mulberry and Coach, but it's 40% less. So how do you actually put that across to people? So on your side, you do drive that value consciousness, don't you?
Yes, and our passion is after it's all about the refined English, all the right English products, and we do compare our sometimes all the quality of the product is similar, like Mulberry or product, but the price is 30-40% less, and our customers do respect that honesty and value, and they always come back and they always happy with our product, and they love us, you know. And as soon as we open stores in Middle East, customers also they love us for the love of us, and they love the value of us.
And we talked briefly before about successful collaboration between retailers and landlords. What do you think they can do to help you retailers sustain that foot traffic? We talked about entertainment, haven't we? And creating that ambience within the mall to emphasise people coming to your shops and everything else. How do you tend to work with your landlords across your brands?
I think it varies from development to development, but if you look at the really successful developments, and I think the two that spring to mind are obviously Dubai Mall and Mall of Emirates. It has to be the objective of the landlord is to retain the customer in the mall for as long as possible. And if you are relying on your supermarket or hypermarket to be the main traffic driver and the point of interest for the customer, then as a retailer, or from my point of view as a retailer, you become very limited on the brands that you can probably put into that development. It's great if you're a coffee shop operator, for example, but if you're a hardcore retailer, it's probably not going to suit you. So I think the landlords now are really trying very, very hard to look at different ways of attracting customers into the mall, but also retaining them in the mall. And I think that comes from everything. And if you look at Dubai Mall and what they do today, people are coming, they're staying at the hotel which is linked to the mall, and in some cases they're not going out of the mall at all. They're there for 2 or 3 days and they go from the hotel to the mall, and that's the entire experience. But I think Dubai Mall is lucky in the sense that it has Boux, it has the fountains, it has the old town, so it's a little bit of a one-off. But I think if you just do a cut and paste basic mall, okay, I stick my hypermarket there, we'll have a few retailers, we'll put a cinema in, and we'll have a soft play area, then it's not going to work going forward. Retailers are looking for more, customers are certainly looking for a lot more. Our climate is great for about 6 or 7 months of the year, but the balance of the year is extremely difficult. So you need to create that city, which is enclosed and air conditioned, but also allows people to enjoy themselves. So it's the food and beverage experience, it's for the kids, it's for the adults, it's for the young adults. You've got to cover all of that. And if you don't tick those boxes today, then you're always going to be struggling to achieve the level of retail mix that you may want to do.
Jeremy, do you find it differs when you implement good customer strategies within your shops from here in Saudi? Do you feel that there's any differences?
Well, retailing standard, as I said a minute ago, has its own set of challenges. I'm sorry, Jayne,
So when you're integrating good customer experience strategies within your stores, do you find it's on a similar level across this region and Saudi Arabia? Do you find that you have to do something more to entice them in?
Well, the Saudi customer is, quite sophisticated now. They're very big users of social media. They're increasingly travelling abroad. They're getting all kinds of Western TV coming into their homes. So whereas maybe 10 or 15 years ago you could give them a selection of product that wasn't really right up to the minute, or maybe the fag end of last season's ranges or whatever, now that absolutely certainly doesn't wash at all. And the other thing to remember about the Saudi consumer in particular is that there's not a lot of necessarily poverty in Saudi, but there's a lot of people with relatively low income. And certainly not everybody's got an oil well in their back garden. People are looking for value for money there, just as they are in every market. So we find that we're constantly having to stress value. We're constantly having to benchmark our prices against our competitors. We're having to do much more in the market now to entice people to shop with us. We're having to put on more kind of offers and buy one get one free kind of thing to get people to keep up their interest. And that's just simply because the market has become much more competitive.
And Neil, what about you? I know you're very good in the UK engaging with customers. We do a lot of marketing, brand marketing, social media. Are you going to look at doing that in the UAE? We talked yesterday about mobile phones and people on their mobile phones in the stores and things like that.
Absolutely. I think that over the last 4 or 5 years, we've heard people talk about multi-channel retail, omni-channel retail, and one thing that's becoming more and more apparent is handheld devices and making the internet accessible to people wherever they are. So, happening in shops all around us right now, there are consumers who are in a shop shopping and at the same time researching on the web what they're actually looking at in the store. And this connectivity and information flow to consumers is something we need to be massively aware of as brands. Because although you may have the biggest brand in the world, a true dinosaur of the last 25 years, it evens the playing field when a consumer can access information about your business and your product instantly in the moment.
And Mariya, the Middle East love British brands. What do you think Aspinall brings to the market that they can't currently get elsewhere? And how do you think this will add to the success of Aspinall in the Middle East?
Yes, Aspinall is all about business. Aspinall names came from very old English countryside, and it means country, trees, green, waterland. When the company is formed, we started to work with major museums on the world and supplying the beautiful stationery all made in England. And it was this is when the name and the logo was created. And all other stores reflect Britishness, and all the products are very beautiful, made all in Europe, or some of the entire collection made in England. And even the hardware and the leather and the lining all made in England. And all our stationery made in England as well. So customers love it's very successful in England.
Strong heritage factors.
Yes, they love it. So it's very, and also they offer such a great value. So it's very honest, very accessible prices. It's very important for the customers.
If we take a look at, guys, I know we discussed yesterday, the consumers and the Arab market behave differently from other emerging and mature markets. What do we need to know to ensure success? Duncan?
To ensure success, well, I think innovation is really important. I think the customer here is really very demanding as well, because you're dealing with so many different nationalities, It's not about one consumer, it's about a whole range of consumers. So and certainly when they, having been, let me start again, if a customer has been here in Dubai for some time, they're exposed to a vast array of retail opportunities. And I think from the customer perspective, it's absolutely fantastic. But from the brand perspective, it means that you've really got to be on the top of your game. It's extremely competitive. The customers are really becoming more and more demanding, which is good from a retail perspective because it makes us better. I think some of the challenges that we have are some of the restrictions that are in place, which are placed by the various countries that we operate in, which restrict you being able to give your customer all the value that you may like to. So, for example, if you want to do a buy one get one free, or give a free gift or something like that, there's a lot of loopholes that you have to go through to get permissions to do this, and it's quite expensive as well. Simple things like, for example, where you want to communicate to your customer that the price was this, and now I'm giving it to you at this price. Yeah, you can't do it. It's very difficult sometimes in countries to be able to do that. And I think that the government has to look at that, and particularly with Expo 2020 coming up. We have to be commercial, we have to be competitive, and it has to be easy to do. I know why they do it. The government put the restrictions in place, and it applies through a lot of the Gulf countries, is to stop consumers being basically ripped off. And I think that's good to protect the customer, but on the other hand as well, you have to give the freedom to the retailer also to be a very commercial operation and allow him to be able to maximise not only his opportunity, but the customer's opportunity as well to come into the store and get some real added value and those glasses. That's buy one, get one free. So that's basically it.
And Jeremy, do you think there's anything that you feel that we need to look at to ensure success in the market?
Well, I think ultimately, as retailers, you've got to make sure you've got a product that you actually want to buy. Because at the end of the day, you can put a load of stuff in a store that people don't actually like it, or it's at the wrong price, and they ain't going to buy it, no matter how good the reputation is, or how good the knowledge. So ultimately, you succeed or fail on whether your product's any good. In our case, we research our market and talk to our customers on a very regular basis. We sell fragrance. We sell fragrance to women that in Saudi are largely covered. And use of fragrance is one way that women can really express their personalities when they can't so easily do so through their clothing. So, we make sure that we have fragrance that is stronger than what you would find in most of our international competitors, like Body Shop or Bath & Body Works, generally have fragrance that is kind of lowest common denominator fragrance that works pretty well anywhere in the world, and as a result, it doesn't actually smell very much. Whereas our fragrances are deliberately designed for the Arab market, and they smell great, and women love them, and they can proudly express their personalities by wearing that fragrance. So it's product at the end of the day. You have to have a product that people actually want to buy, and it's got a reason for being in the market.
Perfect. And Neil, you've got a wealth of expertise with different brands bringing to the market. What would you say was the key factor to take in to ensure success?
I'd say the consumer here is one of the most demanding consumers in the world. You have possibly the best choice of brands anywhere in the world. You have some spectacular malls. The challenge for retailers is to make it every single experience very special. And I think that where brands have decided, when a person walks through the door, I'm going to say this to them, when this happens, I'm going to say this to them, that cookie-cutter approach to retail or service just doesn't work. You have to make it personal. You have to serve a customer person, not have a plan for a group of consumers. So I think the key success here is about making it personal and speaking directly to the customer.
Well, you've not been very forthcoming, audience, with your questions. Do you have any questions for our panellists? Anybody? I think you've bowled them over because nobody's got any questions. Mohammed in the front. Can somebody give Mohammed a mic?
Thank you, John. I really would like to just put a note about people talking about the challenges facing in the region. And one of the challenges, as Jeremy was discussing, is the religious part about it, that we shut down more for 5 times, 4 times a day. But this is a challenge. If you go to any culture, anywhere in the world, they have their own unique different point. If you go to the Jewish, they have the Saturday they don't work. If you go to India, they don't eat the beef. They don't. The point I want to mention is that the smart international retailer who entering a new market with a new vision, if he didn't observe all those challenges or differences of culture or culture, he will be step out soon of the market. That's number one. Number two, as there is a challenge in every market, there is opportunity. In this part of the world, compared to Europe, we operate more to 11 and 12 o'clock in the night, where you guys shut down by 7 and 8 o'clock in the night as a retailer by labor union reservation.